Great. Thank you very much. So it was fabulous to be back having meeting in person, really great. And so we met in Belgium at the University of Liège and had a great meeting. We had some keynote tutorials and then 60 talks or so, and then 40 posters. And it was great to be getting together and joining with fabulous beer with old friends. So next slide. I kicked off the meeting with a review of what Juno is revealing about the magnetosphere of Jupiter. There have been about 150 papers over the past 6 years that Juno has been in orbit around Jupiter. And obviously Jupiter was a major focus of this meeting because of that. There were discussions about the global structure, the plasma sheet, current sheet, the satellite interactions, auroral processes, and the radiation belt. So lots of important topics, lots of discussions about what Juno is seeing. Next. But of course, one of the main topics is how the plasma interacts with the moons. And so there was a substantial discussion about the 4 Galilean moons, but also Titan, Triton, and other planets. And I'll talk more about that in a second. So these are, we've had a flyby now with Juno of Ganymede and Europa. There's results coming out, and I think that maybe Scott will talk about them. But we're coming up to some flybys of Io. So if you look at the next slide, you can see what's happening to our orbit. You can see that because of the oblateness of Jupiter, the orbit is processing inwards. So as we move on the inbound pass, where we go through the equator from south to north, we go through the satellite plane, the plane of the equator. We've gone past Ganymede and Europa. We're now orbit 46 has just happened. You can see we're now beginning to go through the Io Taurus and past Io. And the bottom figure on the right shows these multiple passes of Io plasma Taurus that we'll get over the next couple of years, 3 years. Hopefully the spacecraft will survive. But what's important is that everybody thinks that Io just a little volcano goes off and there's a big change in the environment. That's not actually what we've seen over the past few decades. We've only had 2 major outbursts, one just before Cassini getting there to Jupiter, and then one when Hisaki, before Juno got there, with the Hisaki observations of the Taurus. So I led a charge, hit the next time slot, for us all to jump up and down and get Io to erupt, because now would be a really good time to have an eruption where we can make observations with Juno as we go through. Okay, moving on to the next slide. There was a lot of interest in thinking about the observations that could be made by Europa Clipper and JUICE working together. Unfortunately, this animation was too big to email across, but there's fabulous possibilities of observing the system. Having 2 spacecraft in the system at the same time will be amazing. So this is very important. We had a great update on the Clipper mission by Hayakorth. Next. And also thinking about the decadal survey priorities of Uranus and Neptune, potential Neptune missions and Eurus missions. Corey Cochrane gave some very nice talks about the induction of the moons and how we would learn something highly time variable magnetospheres leading to induction signatures in the moons. And so this was a major topic of discussion. Next slide. He provided some specifics comparing these moons with Callisto, Europa, and Enceladus, moons that we have a lot more experience with. So this is where the plasma physics and the planetary scientists are coming together to try and understand and explore the planetary science of the outer planet satellites, and using these magnetospheres to do this. Next. So MOP is not organized as a via an organization. It's a very informal community of about 200 people. And there were about 120 people at this meeting. And we are going to have another one in 2 years' time. And it's going to be the University of Minnesota. And here's Ali Suleiman and Bob Lysak receiving the MOP, which is the trophy we pass on to the next group of people who will be organizing the Many Spheres of the Outer Planets meeting. And so that'll be happening just as Juno is coming to the very end of its mission and flying through the Io Taurus and making all sorts of measurements there. I want to show my last slide. I know I'm going through this quickly, but there's not a whole lot to say here, except we have had a very successful Juno workshop that we had last month. And I thought it's sort of like a mini MOP in some ways. There were about 60 people from around the world invited for this workshop. And this was very useful because it got us to look at what is happening in our understanding of the Jovian magnetosphere from looking at all the ways, not only of Juno making in situ measurements and remote sensing of the aurora, but also combined with groups around the world who were doing modeling, who are making remote sensing observations. So Hubble, Chandra, ground-based telescopes looking at the aurora, looking at the moons, looking at radio emission, and trying to pull all this together. And so we're in the process of pulling together our understandings of this magnetosphere. We've obviously got another 2 or 3 years, so we've got ways to go, but it was a very useful to have a meeting sort of at this halfway, 2/3 of the way through. So at the end of the prime mission, moving into extended mission, where we got to focus on what have we learned, what are the big outstanding questions, and where do we move forward? What are the new measurements that we need to make to really understand this system? And I don't think we really adjusted the observations that we're going to make, because we're going to get a fabulous passes through. But we would like to emphasize collaborations with people who aren't necessarily on the Juno mission, but are interested in doing modeling, interested in doing remote sensing observations and so on, and move forward with pulling together what our understanding is, or lack of understanding, of how this system works and comes together. So this is a shout out to the rest of the community to get in touch if you have things that we should be thinking about and involving in our study of the magnetosphere. There will be sessions at the AGU where we will be talking about Juno results and so on, and comparing with other observations and modeling work. And that might be an opportunity to discuss how to get involved. So with that, I've gone through that pretty quickly, but if there are any questions, I would be very happy to answer them.
Great, thank you, Fran. Let's see. So for this Juno workshop and follow-on activities, I would think, okay, so I think everybody heard you ask for contact via email if they're interested in getting in touch. But the other thing is that I feel like the OPAG email list is an appropriate way to get the word out about people getting involved. I mean, also you could put it out in pen and stuff, but if people have Outer Planets related workshops that they want to announce or anything like that, I think I would like to encourage people to send OPAG steering committee people messages to send it out to the whole community.
I think that's a good idea. The problem is it's a bit complicated that NASA has certain rules about workshops and running workshops and funding workshops. I don't really understand how this all works, but we ended up having to do this through invitation, and we put the word out to find out who would like to be involved. But there is some difficulties with this, and maybe we need to have a conversation with NASA headquarters about how to make this work. Otherwise, we sort of have to do it at during a conference or attached to a conference that everyone's going to go to anyway. I just want to point out that there's some difficulties with how do we make things inclusive and involving everybody, but at the same time, there is some weird rules that NASA headquarters is working with. So I don't quite understand this and how we make it work.
Good. Thanks for bringing that up. Is Henry online? Who might be able, he's online. Okay, Henry, might you be able to respond to this confusion that Fran refers to here?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the rules are. I know that we do sponsor a lot of conferences through the TWIST program, which is the topical workshops and the symposium conferences. And I suggest that, Fran, let's just talk offline and we'll work out what the situation is with this one. Okay,
thank you, Henry. That's good. Let's do that. Thank you. I think we're going to need an EO Plasmatoris, an EO workshop. There's an ISI workshop happening right now on EO and the EO interaction, but that's by invitation only, and it's a small group. I would like to, especially after the Juno flybys and so on, or maybe before them, maybe before and after, have a get together to discuss where we are with understanding how EO's volcanism and variations in volcanism results in variation in the environment, not only around EO, but of course this has important implications for Europa and Ganymede, because the plasma that is surrounding Europa and Ganymede comes from EO. And so moving into the era of JUICE and CLIPPER, we're going to want to have a ways of monitoring EO, understanding EO's Plasmatoris and its production, and how that goes out to interact with Europa and Ganymede.
Yeah, that's a great point, Fran. And so I'm going to encourage everybody who's listening right now to get in touch with Fran about an IO workshop, because I think a workshop before and or after Juno flybys is really going to be valuable. And you make a good point about maybe even putting together a community, because there's new people now in advance of CLIPPER.
Yep.
To get that community going.
Thank you.
Great. So everybody get in touch with Fran with your interest in involvement there. And we'll see you at the next MOP meeting in a couple of years in Minnesota, everybody. Okay, thanks, Fran. And we'll talk to you again in a little bit.